Hey gang, hope you're having a good Monday so far. Welcome to this week's High Value Publishing session. We're glad to see a bunch of people here in attendance that I know. It's great to see you all here. I'm excited about today's session. This is a topic I'm very passionate about with publishers. Very few publishers have made this transition to becoming from a magazine issue-centric publishing company to being a digital-first publishing company. That's what we're going to talk about today is how do you make that transition? How do you know if you've made that transition and why? What are the advantages and disadvantages that we may have to encounter with this? So very excited about this session and the ability to talk with you guys today about this. I do want to talk a little bit about some housekeeping here. As always, this session is indeed being recorded. We typically release the sessions on the High Value Publishing blog, which is on nearviewmedia.com on Thursdays. It is also put out in What's New in Publishing on Mondays. So this session is indeed being recorded. Any links that we talk about will be available when the recording is posted. So any links we talk about during these sessions will be out there. And again, past sessions will be available at highvaluepublishing.com. That just redirects to the Nearview Media website. It's also available as a podcast. By the way, if you haven't done it already, if you're subscribing on a podcast, would you mind leaving a review? Go to Apple or Google or Spotify, whatever is your favorite podcast platform. Sign up for the podcast and leave a review. It will really help us and get a little bit extra exposure in the podcast ecosystem. If you have any questions during today's session and you're watching us live, feel free to post them in the chat. I am monitoring it over here. If you see me looking over here, I'm not checking my text messages. I'm actually checking the chat log over here. If you're watching it archived, feel free to go to highvaluepublishing.com. And there's a place right there where you can post a question or a topic that you'd like to see us cover in a future episode. And as always, thanks again to What's New in Publishing. They are publishing these sessions every Monday on their website. And again, it's a fantastic publication. I encourage all publishers to go out there and subscribe to it. So let's talk a little bit about web-centric publishing. But first, I want to start with kind of the model that we're used to, and that is what I call issue-centric publishing. So issue-centric publishing is basically where we focus on creating an issue of the magazine first, right? That's what all of our editorial calendar revolves around. Our sales revolve around it. Our whole company, in the most part, has been built upon this. And it's a legacy of being a print-only business. And for a lot of publishing companies, we have yet to break out of this mold. And so the issue becomes the center of the universe. It becomes the center of our sales universe, our circulation universe, the center of, especially of our content universe. We're going to focus mostly on the content side today. So we focus on creating an issue, whether it's in some cases for newspapers, could be daily. For some news magazines, it could be once a week. For others, it could be biweekly, could be monthly, could be quarterly. And again, I'm not talking digital only publishers here. I'm talking publishers who have an actual magazine that they're creating. But the issue still is the center of our universe. Then what happens is typically they'll create that issue and then they dump all the content at once on their website. Or they'll drip out the content, right? So let's say we're creating the March issue right now. March 1 rolls around. We sent out the print publication. We've emailed the link to our digital issue out there to whoever needs it. And we dump all the content on our website. Or we may drip out some content until the next issue, right? And then we typically will supplement that with some other web-only content throughout the month. This is a very, very typical model that I still see prevalent with a lot of today's publishers. Some publishers may not even put the content on their website, or they'll leave a lot of content off because they don't want to give away the print content. This is especially true for publishers who may have a paid publication and you don't want to put your content on your website and you don't have a paywall, or other publishers in the B2B space who don't want to put all the content out there because they want people to sign up and subscribe to their controlled circulation publication, or maybe just don't have the technical infrastructure to do it. But for some reason, they still focus on creating the issue. We will either then take all that content, dump it on the website at once, or we'll drip out the content until the next issue comes out, or we don't even put the content on the website. One of these three things is how most publishers who are still issue-centric will wind up doing it. However, that does lead to a lot of problems. Here's some of the key problems. I'm sure there's some others. If you have some other thoughts, please throw them in the chat. One, old content. I mean, let's think about how we schedule this, right? We are putting together an issue. Let's use a monthly publication as an example, right? Typically, we are out acquiring content way in advance, and then we have editorial close dates, right? So we can get all the copy editing done, all the production processes done, files sent to the printer, etc. Sometimes that can be, maybe it's a couple weeks, maybe it's 3 weeks. Sometimes it could even be 4 weeks before your issue date or more that you're locking in content. Well, the challenge is then once the content goes out and gets into the hands of the readers, that content could be 4 or 5 weeks or even older than when you first commissioned that particular piece of content. That's not necessarily bad. There's a lot of types of articles that are evergreen, that even if they're 4 or 5, 6 weeks old isn't an issue. But there's a lot of content where it does become a challenge. Now, let's say you're going to drip that content out. If you drip that content out over a whole month, that could add a whole other month before that content comes out. So I've seen some publications where by the time a piece of content comes out, that particular piece of content could be 2 to maybe even 3 months old by the time it gets released onto the website. Okay, the other problem that this does, let's say that you're one of these publishers who, hey, we're going to put out the publication on March 1st, and we're going to put all the content on the website. Well, now it becomes a feast and famine for readers, right? They get you're serving them this giant buffet of content on the first of the month, and then they get just maybe this little drip of web-only content throughout the rest of the month, right? So it's this feast and famine thing rather than this consistent schedule of content every single day that is meeting the needs and that is timely out there. It also causes a lot of challenges for social media and content distribution. So especially if you're dumping all your content onto your website at once, whatever your publishing schedule is, when you're dumping it all at once, you're going to overload social media or Google News or Apple News or Facebook Instant Articles, all the content distribution channels you may have. You're going to cause a lot of problems with that. That's not as true when you're dripping content out, but again, at that point there, you've got this problem of you've got old content that you're putting out there, that you're kind of dripping out. Bottom line, this all puts you at a competitive disadvantage to digital-only publications out there. All of us are going to be competing. If we're not competing now, we will be competing with publishers who are putting out content and they're not worried about an issue. They're not worried about a print magazine or a digital magazine. They're just publishing web only. And so that puts us at a competitive disadvantage versus those folks. Matter of fact, I often tell publishers, we better be in the business of cannibalizing ourselves, because if we don't cannibalize ourselves, someone else will cannibalize us. That is one of the biggest challenges here of IssueFirst Publishing, is we're still thinking in this print mentality. And so my challenge to most publishers is to say, let's break away from that. If we were to redo this, let's say we're starting up from scratch today, how would we rebuild the business? Well, I'm going to say DigitalFirst Publishing. This is changing the entire workflow. I'm going to walk you guys through this diagram here. So in a traditional publishing model, the magazine issue is the center of our universe, right? We create the magazine issue, and then off of that, we create a digital flip book, or we'll do distribution through a digital magazine network, or we'll send out an email newsletter off of that, or we'll put it off to our website, right? Everything is a spoke off of the magazine. In DigitalFirst Publishing, your website becomes the center of your publishing universe. So here's how this works. For DigitalFirst publishers, and this is how I will know if a media company has jumped the shark, so to speak, and is now truly thinking digital. They have a digital DNA in their business, is if they're thinking this way. We're going to publish as if we didn't have a magazine, and we're going to treat our publication as an Uber newsletter that's delivered via postal mail or electronically if it's a digital flip book, on a less frequent basis than our email newsletters, right? This is how I know that a media company has made this shift. So we're publishing first to our website, right? This becomes the center of our universe. We're publishing feature articles, columns, news stories, whatever it may happen to be that we're doing. And we're publishing on a regular basis. If you're a paywall company, right? If you have a paid circulation, typically 1/3 to 1/2 of your content will be behind the paywall. A half to 2/3 will be outside the paywall. Well, every single day you're going to put out, a piece of content behind the paywall and a couple pieces of content outside the paywall. Every single day you're putting things out. Maybe you're putting out one feature story a week. You're putting out a news item every single day. You're putting out, a column or some sort of other thing every day as well. Whatever your content schedule is, you're focusing more on this regular stream of content to your readers, rather than dumping a bunch of content to them at once. Take a little side note here. If you think about a magazine or a newspaper, and think about where digital disruption has been the biggest. Digital disruption has been the biggest in the magazine industry, in the newspaper industry, and really in the music industry. That's where the biggest digital disruption has been. Not so much in the book industry and not so much in the movie industry. Yes, things have changed there, but it hasn't really disrupted their businesses as much. Why? If you think about it, a magazine or a newspaper or like a CD or any other kind of an album, those are artificial constructs. They were artificial constructs before the digital age as a cost-effective way of getting content to the reader, right? So as a magazine publisher, hey, we're not just going to mail you one article at a time. No, we're going to put together a publication that has 10 or 20 articles in it and has advertising, and we're going to send it to you. But it's an artificial construct in order to get the content to you, because I can't send you one article at a time. Likewise with newspapers, I can't, it's not cost effective to send you one news story at a time, nor is it practical. So we created a newspaper, an artificial construct that can be delivered through the mail to get you a bunch of information at once. Well, with the digital age, that's no longer as important. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a huge fan of print, big fan of print, especially in the right circumstances. But in the digital age, hey, we can deliver one story at a time, right? Now, a book is a book is a book. You can't just deliver one chapter. You can't just sell one chapter. So that hasn't been as disruptive. Same thing with movies, right? You can't do that. But when you talk about the music industry or magazine industry or newspaper industry, that's why it's been disruptive. So we're going to embrace this by going digital first. We're going to publish first to our website as if we didn't have a publication. And then the minute we publish to the website, we will instantly push that piece of content out via organic social media. And there's some really clever ways that you can do that we'll get into probably in one of our sessions down the road. We're going to push immediately out, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok's becoming even more popular now, which we'll talk about at some point. But typically Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn are the most popular content for the B2B spaces. You can swap out LinkedIn for Instagram in the consumer markets, sometimes Pinterest. But anyway, we publish to our website and we instantly push out to social media. We also instantly push out through content distribution channels. So we had a session, I think just last week or 2 weeks ago, about Google News. You'll push out through Google News, Google Discover, using Google Publisher Center. If you didn't catch that episode, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, go check out that episode. So we'll push out through Apple News or Facebook Instant Articles, right? So the minute we push the website, we're pushing out through these channels as well. More progressive publishers, you're going to have a native app, right? You're going to have a native iOS and Android app so that you actually have presence on the desktop of your readers, right? Even in the B2B space, with something like 50, 60% of emails are being read on mobile devices. Some B2B markets, we're seeing 50, 60% of your website traffic is coming from mobile devices. Consumers, even more. So we'll have a whole session. We'll probably talk about native apps at some point. They don't have to be ridiculously expensive anymore. They don't. We're talking $2,000 to get one out the door. It does not have to be crazy expensive, especially if you're on the WordPress platform. Other platforms, a little different. But pushing out, so you push out to your website, you push out through here, you push out through here, you push out through your native app. Maybe you're using website notifications, right? Those little pop-ups that come on when you go to a site and they say, hey, we'd like to push you notifications when we have new content. Maybe you're doing that. Maybe you're putting out through a daily email newsletter. As a matter of fact, for most publishers, I actually recommend daily updates. That could be a whole other session we dive into, or a weekly digest, right? So you're now, these are all instant. Publishing your website and then pushing out through all of these is pretty much instant. Email then becomes a daily or weekly occurrence, or semi-weekly, that you're pushing out via email. You're aggregating and pushing out content on a regular basis to notify people about content. Well, your publication now becomes another distribution channel for the content that you're creating for your website. So what do? Well, when it comes time to put the publication together, let's say we're on a monthly publication cycle, and when it comes time to put the publication together, we go back and we look and say, okay, what's the best of the best, right? What are the stories that are resonating the most with our audience? We can actually use our analytics to figure out what are the hot stories, or maybe there's something strategic that we decide to do, even if it's not one of the most popular articles. Fine. But you choose the best, and then maybe you supplement or edit down depending on what you need to fit in the print format and print layout. And maybe you reserve the cover story. Maybe the cover story is the one thing that you reserve for the publication, that when the publication launches, that's the one story that you launch and you publish that on your website on that day, right? So there's still a tie-in. You could do it a variety of different ways. But the point is, you are pushing out to your publication like you would your email newsletter, only your publication also carries advertising, and it's a profit center. So it's an Uber newsletter, if you would, pushed out via print or pushed out via digital. Side note here, we will talk about digital flipbooks during one of these sessions. I won't go too deep in it now, but suffice it to say, I'm not a huge fan of digital flipbooks. I still think that they're a necessary evil in some markets, but we'll talk about that probably in a later session here. But you push out via your publication. This is flipping the editorial and production workflow on its head, right? We typically are going the other way. We're building our magazine issue, then we're dumping stuff out, and then additional web content is a secondary concern. I'm saying flip it around. Publish web first. Think about that. Change your publishing cycles. And if anybody has already done that and would like to chat with me about it, I would love to chat with you about it. Drop me an email, eric@nearviewmedia.com. It's right down there on the slide. Drop me an email about it. I would love to hear what you're doing. I'd love to hear about your experience, what you're seeing out of that. I know several publications who have done it very successfully. I know some publications who are still doing print first, issue first, public publishing. And that's okay. But it's kind of operating with one hand tied behind their back in a lot of situations. And I really challenge you, you want to really truly go digital first, publish website first, and then push it out through all these methods. The idea is saying, hey, look, we don't care how you follow us. When you publish first to a website, don't expect people to just come out. As a matter of fact, if you look at your analytics, on average, people come out to your website 1, maybe 2 times a month. On average, they're not seeing all your content out there. So we got to let them know. That's why we push out through organic, and we notify them. Hey, if they're following us in here, that's awesome. We notify them via content distribution. We're pushing out via an app and putting a little, the little red dot on your app. Oh my gosh, I've got 3 new stories I haven't seen. You're pushing website notifications. You're pushing it out via email. You're pushing it out via print. These are all push vehicles. Website is a passive vehicle, if you would. So this is the DigitalFirst Publishing model. Let's talk about some of the objections that I've heard as I've been working with various publishers, helping them make this transition. So the first and biggest question that most publishers have is, hey, my magazine won't have unique content, especially if they're a paid publication, right? They're paying money for this publication. They're paying $20 a month, or in some cases in B2B spaces, 80 or $100 a year, whatever it may happen to be, $20 a year, $100 a year, whatever it may happen to be. And the magazine won't have unique content. That's actually okay, because if you actually look at it, look at your metrics, look at your analytics you have, Google Analytics, whatever analytics you may have. Again, you'll see most people come to your website an average of 1, maybe 2 times a month tops. Now, it could be a little more than that if we're dealing with like a forum or community-based website. I sometimes will see higher visitation rates, but typically that's it. And typically they're looking at 1 to 2 pages per session that they come out to your site. So this idea that the magazine won't have unique content, yeah, they may get an article, and especially if you're reserving the cover story for the actual publication release, they won't have seen that. And then they may have seen 1 article or 2. They go, oh yeah, I saw this on the website. It won't matter. They don't care, because they're still seeing the content, especially if you're able to successfully execute a paywall. There's a lot of publications, especially in the regional publishing space, that really should move over to a paywall model. But nonetheless, we will not have to worry too much about the magazine having unique content, because frankly, not everybody follows us on social media. And even if they do, you're lucky if 3 to 5% of your followers see any given post that you do. On Twitter, it's less. It's like less than 1%. Your email newsletter, most open rates are going to be around 20% unique open rates. Okay, you may go up to 40% unique open rate. Rock on. I've seen some publishers who do that. But still, that means that 60 to 80% of your readers didn't open that email and didn't see that content, let alone Google News, right? So don't worry about this. You need to more worry about delivering a steady stream of content to your readers on a regular basis. Hey, this is going to change our production process, right? Yeah, it is. It's going to change your production process. Embrace it. Change is going to be hard. I understand. It's never fun, but embrace it. Change the production process. And actually, most editorial departments, when I've worked with them on this and they've gone through it, they actually wind up kind of enjoying it, because they're able to, they're actually now authoring right there in WordPress. They're doing their authoring right there. And oh, by the way, they've got great SEO because they're doing it right there in WordPress, and they're doing the search engine optimization right there. And then they take it into the print, and they adapt it for the print. And they're actually having a lot of fun seeing that and seeing the real-time analytics of what content people are responding to. It also gets the editorial department much more in tune with the analytics that you're doing. So yes, it will change your production processes. People won't want the print now, and print is my magazine is still the lion's share of my revenue. I found that to be the case, especially if you are doing, especially your paid publication and you're putting things behind the paywall, right? Actually, I see subscriptions can increase with this. Or if you're a B2B publication, you have a controlled circulation, perhaps we do, a registration paywall, or a registration wall, reg wall, rather than a paywall. But I haven't really seen this necessarily where people won't want print. However, let's say that there are some markets, and this again, I typically see happening in the B2B trade markets, rather than in like regional city publishers or regional B2B publishers or consumer enthusiast, hobbyist publications. I still see print being very strong in those markets. But let's say that you are in a market where it does begin to shift and people do want the digital more. Well, that if you're building out the revenues on that, and that's part of what we'll talk about in this series, I've got several publishers who have moved that, and they're now saying, hey, we've made this transition, so we're in a place that if we do want to ultimately drop print and become digital only, we can. It's not a major cultural shift for us. We have the option. So it leaves a lot more options open for you. So that is the DigitalFirst Publishing model. Hopefully you have found this to be helpful. I do want to give a little plug for next week's session. We're going to dive into search engine optimization. Oh yes, SEO and what does Google want? How can I get more traffic from Google? And not just Google. You're going to be surprised when I show you some other numbers in this too. But we're going to talk about search engine optimization next week for publishers. So that's it for today's session. I hope you really enjoyed it and found it somewhat useful. And we will see you next week.